right, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The Way of El Marco. This is episode, my God, I forgot which episode we're on. This is episode 12. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest this week. No other than the one and only Jedediah Thomas.
Howdy.
Hey, buddy. Welcome, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, dude. I'm going to give the people back home, whoever's watching, all five of them, I'm going to give them a little background on where we met, which was Sales Sniper Boot Camp last year, I believe, in February. Right?
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while. Yeah, that's the same. That's where I also met Tyler Musson. He was on a few episodes back. So that's where we first met. You were my first role play buddy in the Sales Sniper Boot Camp. Really? And yeah. When I finally got around, I was like, "Hey, dude, do you want to role play with me?"
You know, they say you always remember your first, right?
That's true. I'm never gonna forget you. Yeah, I wasn't. Well, actually, no. I was already on a roll, and it totally sucked. My experience on it. It wasn't even really technically a role. That's a different story for another time. But for you, man, you've been in the game for quite a while, haven't you? Like at least
I've been in sales probably about 12 years.
12 years. Okay. All right. Well, first I want to get a little grounding as far as where you are located geographically.
Okay. I'm in North Carolina, USA.
North Carolina. Okay. Have you always been in North Carolina?
No. My dad was Air Force, so I've lived like all over the place.
Oh, wow. Was your dad career Air Force?
Oh yeah. He retired Lieutenant Colonel.
Oh, no. Oh, wow. So, okay. So your dad was an officer. Okay.
Well,
Gotcha.
he actually, it's funny. He started out enlisted, then he went to school on the benefit program, whatever, and then he went back in as an officer because he hated civilian life. So,
Gotcha. Oh, that's hilarious. All right. So you've been around. Was his tour duty mostly stateside, or did you guys get to go all over the world?
So since he had his family, it was mostly stateside. But before I was born, before we had a family, he was in Germany and all over the world. But he was in special operations weather, and so we stayed kind of towards the main bases. When he was an officer, so like Colorado Springs, whatever that mountain is. The big one that they Stargate
NORAD.
SG-1. Yeah, NORAD. Yeah.
Mount
Yeah,
Cheyenne,
like
I think it's
near
called.
there. What?
Mount Cheyenne, I think it's called.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, Cheyenne Mountain. Yeah.
Yeah, Cheyenne Mountain.
I
That's
was
right.
only like 5 when I was there. So it's been a while.
Oh God. All right. So I'm not going to ask you about any type of weird extraterrestrial activity going on over there then.
You mean apart from me?
Well, we're definitely going to get into that. All right. So, so interesting, dude. So your dad being an essentially career Air Force military, all that, what kind of influence and impact do you think that's had on you and your upbringing and your philosophical outlook on things?
Well, I would say two things. Like one is that I really wanted to go into the military myself. Like that was always a dream, but I have asthma. And so that's like one thing that's like absolutely they will not touch. They work with a lot of other stuff like that, so they just they will not work with that. So it's like I wanted to go into the Navy, and that just never worked out for me. So it's kind of like trying to find my passion without my passion kind of thing. Like the thing that I want to do, I can't do. So now like what else do I want to do? And then so that was kind of like one element of it. And then the other is that you hear these stories of like, oh, I grew up in this town and I've known these people my whole life. Like, and I don't know anybody for more than like 6 months. Right. So like knowing you for a year is like, an awesome accomplishment, and I actually know people for longer now online than I ever had growing up.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty cool development that we have with these different types of friendships. These are still friendships, right? We haven't met each other in the flesh.
Yeah.
But I consider you a good friend of mine. Right. And I've made a lot of good friends within the online space in particular because of, well, my involvement in sales.
Yeah.
Like straight up. Right. And it's just like this really interesting club that we are a part of. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, just so many different types of people, man.
Right.
And so yeah, that's a really good point you bring up, right? Because moving around, growing up, and being just essentially a military, that's like, as I call them, military brats, right?
Yeah.
You don't get to stick around for too long. um and so my what I've grown to know about, what I've come to know about you, is that you seem to me, you seem to be like this very logical man, right? Like if we were to, but also you've also started this coaching business as well, right?
Mhm.
And how long have you been, how long have you been at that?
So coaching in general, so I actually had done sales coaching for a couple months, and then I got hired on by a big sales agency as the head sales coach for like one of their training programs. And so it became a conflict of interest. So I had to stop doing that, but I was like, well, I really want to still be coaching. So what kind of other coaching can I do? And then I was like, well, relationships, this, that. And I was like, what, I'll be a mindset coach. I've studied a lot of like mindset stuff. So like now I'm doing mindset coaching.
Cool. Okay.
So that's like I don't know, 6 months that I've been coaching at all, I would say.
Okay. Okay. um why mindset?
Well, because like I said, it's something that I've studied intensely, probably for about the last 8 years. I've studied a lot of different like logical modalities, a lot of kind of like the woo-woo, like esoteric stuff. And it's something that's always really, really interested me. It's like I love the mind. I love, what are we as people?
Hmm.
Like what makes us tick? Like
Hmm.
who are we? And why do things work out the way they do?
Hmm. Gotcha. um that takes me back to that interaction we had on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, where
Mhm.
I was asking you about mind, brain, things like
Yeah.
that. And so you brought up the two sides of the mindset training that you've been doing and
Mhm.
study for the past 8 years, right? And now you've
Mhm.
been coaching for the past 6 months. You mentioned the logical, and now you also mentioned the woo, right? So
Yeah.
I want to explore. Let's talk about the logical. So when
Okay.
you say the logical, are you talking about like the mechanics of the brain, like the physiology and the psychology? Like how, what do you refer, like what do you mean by
So
logical?
yeah, it is very much the mechanics, but it's not the physiology, it's not the psychology. So the physiology would be like, I don't know what the parts of a brain are. I think it has a stem, but so do grapes. So, what do I know? And the psychology, like I don't, I've never studied psychology, so like I don't know even what that would entail, but what I do is probably very different than what psychology is, which psychology is very much the studying and labeling of the symptoms of the mind, and I don't care about the symptoms, I care about the root causes of why there's issues.
Mm. Okay. So to hell with the symptoms. Let's
Yeah,
get to the root cause. All right.
right.
So give me an example. Give me, if you can.
Yeah, so there's like basically I have kind of like a triangle of like three things that I hit, which kind of encompass more or less all mindset issues, which is traumas, limiting beliefs, and motivation, right? And so you're talking about like kind of logical. So limiting beliefs are usually more logical because they're more language based, right? So
Mhm.
if you say I can't do this, maybe that's a limiting belief, right? I mean,
Yeah.
maybe you can't do it. Like I can't fly. That's not a limiting belief. It's just a fact. But then there's also things like you should be able to do. Like I can't call this person, right? Well, you can, but you have some kind of limiting belief that's stopping you, right? So that's like more like logical and language based. And then you have traumas, which my definition of trauma is a little different than probably what you would expect. Is that the trauma response is kind of like a natural response that we go through on a like a normal, maybe not a daily basis, but weekly or monthly. It's a common thing. Anytime our subconscious deems that we're in danger or our survival is at stake, it starts this process to remember that situation and all of the events. And if that process plays out, there's no problem. And it's only when that process gets interrupted that it creates a traumatic imprint where then people like, you like PTSD or like, when they have a trigger and then they like freak out, like that's a recalling of that traumatic imprint because that process got interrupted. Right. So
Mm.
that's the second part. And then motivation is just like, well, It usually means that you're wired in the wrong way, right? So it's like your brain is seeing short-term pleasure is greater than long-term pleasure, and long-term fear is greater than short-term fear, right? So my goal then would be to flip that around and make you motivated by the long-term pleasure and the short-term pain, right? So it gets you moving in ways that your brain wouldn't otherwise do.
Gotcha. Okay, that's cool. So you've got this trifecta that you work out
Yeah,
logically with your clients. Now you mentioned the other side. You've got this like woo woo part of things. Can you?
right.
I mean, woo woo means a lot of different things to different people. So I'm curious. Like, what's your take on the woo woo?
So the woo woo is like stuff that I want to believe in. Like it's
Oh, Fox
mostly
Mulder.
spirituality. Like I'm have an advanced certification in like Ho'oponopono, which is like a Hawaiian practice of healing. But with those things, like my issue with that is like I would love to be able to do that, but I can't measure the results, right? Like if I
Uh
do
huh.
X and I say, okay, I'm doing this, and therefore you should get this result. How do I know that this caused that result? And so like I just don't think it's ethical to charge people for something I can't prove that I'm doing. Right. With the logical stuff, I can go in there and I can remove a trauma and I can like shift your beliefs, and it's like immediate. You're like, holy crap, what just happened to me? And I was like, well, I did that and it's measurable, right? And but like the woo-woo stuff, it's like, okay, I can shoot all this stuff into the cloud or whatever and hope that your life improves. But okay, even if it does improve, would it have improved anyways? And it's just I just don't feel right charging for something that I can't, you know, confirm is the cause of what's happening.
Right. That's an interesting place. Any type. So the Honopono sounds like some type of energy. It's an energy healing practice, right? Of some kind.
So it's let me see. It was so the guy I learned from is Dr. Joe Vitale, and he learned from a guy that was like a Hawaiian kahuna, I think is they're
Uh huh.
called.
Yep.
Dr. It was Doctor somebody. He's like actually a psychologist or a psychiatrist or something. But the story goes is that this Hawaiian guy worked at say like a mental ward right at a hospital, and he never met with the patients. Not one single time. He would just practice Ho'oponopono, which is basically reconciling the issues he sees in others with himself. So the idea is that if I heal myself, then the world around me heals, right? So he didn't meet with any patients. He just went in there. He practiced Ho'oponopono, which the version that I received is repeating, "I love you. I'm sorry. Thank you. Forgive me." Basically permanently, right? It's reconciling yourself, and then supposedly all of the people, all the patients in there just started healing and getting better as he worked on himself. So like he would read their files and he says, "Oh, if I see that on the file, therefore that exists within me. If I heal myself, then that goes away." Right. So that was the idea. And I don't know if this is an anecdotal story or if it actually happened or what, but like that's the kind of thing. It's like, well, how if that really worked, why is there still issues in the world, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure.
So it's like how do you actually know that that's the cause? Like it's a beautiful thing to believe, but I also want to help people on a practical level too, and I just like maybe it does, but I can't prove it, right? So then there's other things as well.
Whoa. Okay. What a trip. Okay. Now we're starting to get into some weird stuff. I'm glad I wore this Hawaiian shirt, dude. so so then the basis of that particular modality is then the first thing that just popped in my mind is kind of like how well this is gonna take us into this other direction where this idea like how like Jesus died for your sins,
Uh-huh.
right? There's that idea. Not that I'm saying that's the case. I'm just bringing it up because it sounds like this dude is now taking on the ailments of this of who the doctor, right, is taking on the ailments of the patient, and somehow he's like transmuting, he's doing some type of transmutation to energetically or etherically or whatever we want to call it, right? And now these people are seeing a benefit because of this work that he's doing.
Well, okay, so that would be one explanation, but how it would be described in the actual practice is not that you're taking on other people's ailments, is that other people's ailments are an expression of what's already wrong within you. So it's not like you're taking on the outside, it's
Oh,
like you're healing yourself and that reflects to the outside.
Oh wow, that is just kind of that's
Yeah, it's like a mind blow kind of thing, but you know, it's like okay, but so how do you honestly like practice that and teach that? Because if I tell you that, right? So like if I believe truly that everything is because of something is wrong with me, and then I teach you that practice, then on some level I would have to believe that you would have to believe that something is wrong with you,
yeah. I mean, that's
right?
right.
So like
It's weird, dude, because now it's like, where does personal responsibility fall into this,
right,
right? And
right.
and then are we particularly does this particular practice just mainly deal with physical ailments, or does this also go into other type of ailments like mental issues and things like that?
Well, yeah, so like supposedly that was a story that he solved all those mental issues, right? So it's like supposedly all of the problems in the world are a reflection of problems in you, according to that philosophy, right?
Which if you like, if you think about, like, maybe I think like in Hinduism, right, and other traditions where we are just reflections of each other, right?
Hmm.
When you talk about, like, when you run into somebody you don't like, and it's usually because you're seeing something in them that you don't like, that's something in you that you recognize that you don't like as well, right? And so
Yeah,
I'm curious. I wonder if that's something along those lines, because it's like if they're on a like a really all right. So if the Big Bang actually occurred and all matter, matter and energy at one point in time were basically in this ball,
mm-hmm.
right? The same matter and energy that we're part of right now. So if we were all together at one point in time, then suddenly it just went and
Hmm.
like technically we were all kind of touching, right? And in some way we kind of are. You see what I'm driving at? So like, what if the dude had a point, right, where it's just like
Yeah,
that whole idea where it's like, well, I mean, yeah, dude, separation's just kind of an illusion, it's not even real, but I'll fix my shit in order to fix your shit, watch.
right. Yeah, and see that's kind of the issue with the woo-woo stuff. It's like, yeah, it could be the case, but I can also explain that logically. Like when you like you're talking about when you see someone that you don't like and
Yeah.
it's because of something in you, it's probably a trauma or a limiting belief, right?
There we
Because
go.
at some point you attached importance to what that action or those words were. Like if I called you a moogle bumple dumple dump, right? You would be like,
How dare
okay,
you?
well, there's a C. No, no, taking the day off. Sorry, man. I got to go home on a fun of myself now. But my point is like you don't have a reaction because there's nothing there, right? You're really
Yeah.
like, what the heck are you talking about? That doesn't even make sense. But if I called you something that you were called maybe as a child
Yeah. Yeah.
by a parent or a friend or whatever, and then that could actually hurt you, it's because it goes back to that original incident. Right.
Yes.
And so it's
Yes.
like there's an anchor. So it's like, so like, why would I need a spiritual explanation when I can explain logically and I can fix it in seconds as opposed to this esoteric thing, which might happen over the course of weeks or months or years? Might, right? And I can't even prove it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Now I okay, now I see what you mean. Okay, that's cool.
Right.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. So the other day you had a post about removing a thorn out
Yep.
of your, you mean the metaphorical,
Right. Right.
not a literal. I mean,
Right.
unless it's like
So
that. But yeah,
yeah,
so
so that's kind of an amalgamation of like several of my different clients. One of my clients, just after one session with me, I removed some traumas, some limiting beliefs, like major traumas. After the first session, got off of like 14 different psychiatric medications. They're like, I don't need this anymore. I'm like, well, you need to talk to your doctor because you can't just like cut them cold turkey, right? That's like not healthy, but like I'm glad you're doing better, right? But that's the kind of like changes and shifts that happen because I'm just like pulling out the thing that's causing the pain, then the healing starts. And then so it doesn't matter how long the trauma has been there, it doesn't matter how big the trauma is, I can rework that in the mind so it releases that pain, right?
mhm.
And then same like limiting beliefs are can be a little trickier because they are logic based, so it's a matter of like so you can believe something consciously, right? So it's like I know consciously I'm a good person, right? But maybe your subconscious doesn't believe it, so I have to go in there and convince your subconscious that it's true, right? And so that's a little trickier to pull off, but it's still very fast, right? So like each like a trauma I can get rid of in like 5 minutes. let me believe I can get rid of in like, 5 or 10 minutes. But if there's like a lot of stuff in there, it just takes like a lot of removing, right? So,
Mm.
okay, there's one thorn, maybe like that's the one issue, and you've never had another issue in your life, and I fix that and you're fixed, right? But maybe you have like repeated abuse or something as a child, or like there's a lot of life-threatening situations you've been in, you have a lot of self-doubt, a lot of self-belief. I can work through all of those one by one. It just, takes more time. So it's like pulling out all of the thorns, right? You have a whole thorn bush in your head as opposed to just one like big old stake. Right?
Yeah, I wonder which one's better, right? Okay, this is fascinating, man. So then what's your what's your approach then? So someone has an issue and they come to you and they're like, "Hey, I've got this limiting belief." And I at this stage of the game, because you're I'm gonna call it your practice.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna say
Basically.
your practice is still in its infancy.
Mhm.
And who would you say at this stage of the game is the like your typical client avatar, like the majority of the people seeking help? Like where are they coming from?
Right. So I kind of frame that ahead of time where it's like, I don't want to just make people feel better. I want to help people take action. Right.
Mm.
So usually it's someone that's like, I know I need to be doing this. And for some reason I can't. And so then I would dig into why you're not able to perform that action. Right. So it's like, if I work with somebody, I have a diagnostic document that's like, what are you trying to do? Are you able to do it? Like all these different questions that help me diagnose, like whether it's motivation, limiting beliefs, or trauma, or a combination of them. And I just start going in there and I just start pulling out whatever the issues are. And so I don't just make people feel better as my goal. Like I want to actually get them like practical, tangible results that help them make money or focus better, right? So that's kind of like the end goal. But along the way, the brain just wants to heal, right? So like it will not present the things that make you focus better. It will present the most painful things that it needs to get rid of. And we just start scraping off layer by layer by layer. And eventually we've got enough of that, it tips the scales, and you're like, holy crap, I have like absolute laser focus now.
Wow, that's really cool. So next question for you. I'm going to take it back to our conversation that we were having on Facebook.
Mhm.
What is mind?
So, I mean, I pulled up the dictionary definition. Like, I can't give you a better definition than that. Like I don't know what it is, but that seems generally like a good way to describe it. It's like the part of us that's aware of stuff, right? And you have kind of the conscious mind, which is located more kind of in the head, and then you have the subconscious mind, which is we were talking about kind of more the heart and the gut, right? And it kind of connects in different parts of the brain. But so your conscious mind is like 10% of who you are, right? It's your thinking ability. Like we're having a conversation based off of our conscious minds, right?
This
And
awareness right now that is having this
right,
conversation with you is
right,
only
we're aware
10%
of
of,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that's only 10% of who
Is
we are. And then the 90% is this like unfathomable depth of the subconscious, which is like the world's like more powerful than any computer that will ever be invented. Is like the processing power is enormous, and it's a repository of basically every experience we've ever had, all the senses we've ever recorded. And it's like, so the reason why we're able to speak language is because it's at a subconscious level. I'm not consciously thinking, okay, here's the words, here's a verb. Like I'm pulling it out of this immense repository, and that's how we're able to speak. That's how we're able to perform actions. Like when you're like first driving and you're just like freaking out and you're like, like concerned, and then at some point that skill goes to your subconscious, and you can drive while talking on the phone, hanging, eating, and then you're driving with your foot, because you're so dialed in because you're operating from your subconscious. So that's like a practical difference between the two.
90%'s huge. And you said that it's infinitely more powerful than any computer that is out there or can be ever created.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm gonna bring it up because this is something that's been fascinating me, and I think it's been fascinating a lot of others. Artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah.
And so Number one, let me ask you a question. And I don't, I just want to get your opinion on the matter. Like our minds being as powerful as they are, do you think that we will ever be able to create through our artificial intelligences, right? Do you think we'll be able to create something that will match, mimic, or exceed what we have that we've, it's been created over fucking millions and millions of years?
Yeah, so matching, mimicking, in some aspects, exceeding. Like, so our conscious minds are meant to make decisions. That's the purpose of our conscious mind, right? Like our subconscious stores information, right? Like memory. But the problem with a lot of people is they try and store memories in their heads, and it
Mm.
doesn't work. It like fries your circuits because it's not built for that. You're
Oh,
built to make decisions off of data, right? So it's like one quick hack for anybody is if you have trouble remembering stuff, don't try because we're not wired for it. Write it down, right? And then make decisions off of what you've written down, right? Don't try and hold all this crap in your head. So that's like a simple thing. So yeah, a computer can definitely exceed that because we can't hold 5 terabytes worth of textbooks in our head, right? But as far as like mimicking, yeah, like artificial intelligence at some point is going to be so real that we can't tell the difference. But it's still not thinking, it's not feeling, it's just imitating through programming this awareness, even though it doesn't have that awareness.
what makes you so sure that we're thinking?
Well, I think a lot of people don't. I have noticed a severe lack of thought in the world, unfortunately.
Okay, well, let's get into a little skepticism then, right?
Okay.
Like, okay, did you ever get into philosophy? You ever study philosophy?
Not really.
Like Descartes, you familiar with Descartes and his whole
I've heard of him.
cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am.
I've heard of that.
Okay. So here's okay. I guess it's what I'm toying with is this. Were you ever a fan of Star Trek Next Generation?
I've seen some episodes, but it's like I don't. If you're talking about the philosophy behind it, like all I know is they fly around on a starship. So
Well, okay. Are you familiar with the character Data, the android?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So this dude had a positronic brain, whatever that means, right?
Okay.
But at some point he was he was deemed like sentient, right? And his
Hmm.
creator gave him a chip that allowed him to feel emotions,
Hmm.
and he was actually able to feel emotions, and he was like pretty damn close to I would say probably in some instances more human than human. Like he
Hmm.
was kind of like this very compassionate android, right?
Yeah.
And so this thing that we have up here is pretty damn powerful, and it's a
Hmm.
result of, I tend to side with millions and millions of years of evolution, right?
Hmm.
um and so I guess from what you're saying is that there's a big difference between what what we're doing is we're able to store in our subconscious a ton of stuff, but then
Hmm.
our other part of the 10% is for decision making. Like
Right.
what's the difference between like what's going on with us here and like a really highly advanced AI at that point?
Right. So, in terms of processing information, there's not really, right? So,
Okay.
if you just look at it from like a baseline, the issue is that human beings are much more than just our brains or our body, right? So that's why we have a mind. Is this thing that is like the cross section of some, I wouldn't say interdimensional, but some other thing that is coinciding with our physical form, right? You could call it a soul, you could call it there's something else there, like that, like we are not our bodies, right? Whereas an android would never be anything but their body, right? There is no that other essence of who we are as people or as energy beings or whatever you want to call it is not possible to recreate in a machine.
So there's that spark
Right.
about us, whether it's however you're going to call it, soul,
Yeah.
consciousness, right? What do you think that is? What do you think that is? When do you think that starts? How do you is it one of those things where does it need there's this idea of like embodied consciousness,
Right.
right? Where it's like consciousness needs all of this in order for it to be, well, conscious, right?
Yeah.
To be around, and all the necessary components and all these, you know, what, trillions upon trillions, or is it billions of neurons interacting with each other? I
I would assume trillions.
Probably
That's a lot.
trillions, right?
Yeah.
Probably trillions. And so something happens up there. Take for example, okay, when the Tibetans, the Buddhists, I think they say, what is it, like after 40 days of conception, there's a soul in the body, right?
Hmm.
Consciousness, right? There's
Yeah.
enough going on in there that now it's imbued with consciousness. Is it one of those things where it's grown enough to a point and there's enough neural connections to where suddenly it's like, boom, or is it this thing that goes boom, from wherever?
Well, I mean, it really depends on your philosophy. So you're saying they say 40 days after. I've heard it happens the moment at conception. And then, of course, people don't believe that you're a person until you're born. So it's like, it's like, what philosophy do you follow, right? There's as many theories as there are possibilities. And so it's like that gets into kind of the more spiritual kind of woo realm. It's like I could make a case for it anyway, but I have no idea, right? Like that's not the realm I operate in. It's interesting to philosophize about, but um, I don't know how you would test that.
I almost
You
wonder,
have a gun that says, okay, this has a soul, this does not have a soul, right? Like a temperature recorder, right? And then
right?
you like
Yeah,
zap it, and okay, that has a soul, right?
right.
The
Totally, totally
light goes
right.
green.
You're here. Can you pee on this strip? Oh, cool. You have a soul. I think it's almost one of those questions, maybe even one of those topics where it's like not even where like so what it how if whether we're going to determine the thing has a soul or not. It's kind of like the question of like, are we living in a simulation? And
Yeah,
it's like, well, if we are, what's the big deal? And if we're not, okay, cool. What's the difference?
right.
So at least there's this, I don't know. It's already weird enough as it is,
Yeah.
right? And so let's get a little weirder with that, man. Like, what what are your influences when it comes to this mindset training? Like, who were the people that you were getting into?
Yeah. So my my philosophy is like totally different on that. So I've not like studied psychology at all, like I said. So if you actually understand the mind, you can learn more about the mind by studying computer science than you can by studying psychology.
Oh,
Because like I said, psychology is about the symptoms of the mind. So if you picture a computer screen, right? You have the screen and it shows on the monitor what's going on. And psychologists are like, okay, that's what's on the monitor. Okay, what's on the monitor now? And I just go into the hard drive and I start changing the code, and it's like, oh, like the whole thing changes, right? And so that's what I'm concerned about, is kind of the deeper stuff. As far as actual like resources, there's only a couple of like things that other people could study that I've drawn from, but like nothing has all of the answers. And so the reason I created my methods, like, maybe a month ago or whatever, is because I wasn't satisfied with any of the tools that were out there. I wasn't satisfied with any of the explanations in full. And so I kind of like pulled all of the stuff that made the most sense, and I created that from that, right? So as far as actual like understanding trauma, I would say Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine. So he's a trauma psychologist. And so his understanding of trauma, or my understanding of trauma, came from him almost word for word, but my method is completely different because I couldn't figure out how to get his method to work, right? So I was
huh.
like there's something missing, and I was like, okay, well, let me use that theory and make my own method, and now I can heal trauma, right? But and then the other one, say maybe for like limiting beliefs, maybe some trauma, believe it or not, actually Dianetics from Scientology.
Mm-hmm.
I think they got a lot of things right, and they were ahead of their time, but they also got a lot of things not right. And so it's like I draw very heavily from both of those, but my understanding is completely different than either, and my methods are completely different. So it's like I draw from a lot of different sources. I've drawn from a lot of different tools that I've tried to work on myself, from hypnosis to normal therapy, like all this different stuff, because I've been through a lot of traumatic stuff myself in my life, and I was trying to fix myself, and that's why I studied all of this, right? So it's like I
Yeah.
have all of this like knowledge, And it's like I was just able to package it in a way that's like extremely and immediately effective.
You brought up two interesting things. You're saying you can learn more about the mind with through computer science, and then you mentioned Dianetics.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. You know, Scientology gets a lot of flack
Hmm.
for various reasons. You know,
Yeah.
okay, for sure. But there are some interesting things that did come out of that place, man.
Hmm.
Despite L. Ron Hubbard's interesting background. Can you point out a couple of things that you've drawn? Because here's the thing, right? I think especially
Hmm.
with cancel culture and how people have gotten so sensitive with things,
Hmm.
and you can't be woke. Like, how woke are you, bro? Um, and and they're always quick to, for example, like when people got hip to Operation Paperclip years later, where it's like, yeah, we basically grabbed a bunch of Nazi scientists to
Hmm.
bolster up our shit, and it's like, oh my god, how could you? And it's like, well, how could you not?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like the same thing where I've always wanted to toy with this idea of like sharing quotes of someone very nefarious, but quotes that make absolute sense, but do
Yeah.
not attribute it to anyone. And they'd be like, oh, yeah, that's really great. Who said that? And you'd be like, oh, well, you mentioned some dude, an awful person. They're like, oh my
Right.
God. And it's like, okay. And I don't know if there's a fallacy. I don't know if there's like a logical fallacy that's
Hmm.
attributed to that. But regardless of that,
Yeah.
the Dianetics thing that you mentioned, okay,
Yeah.
what, because there's gold everywhere.
Right.
There's fucking gold everywhere. And I think that's the thing where people get really hemmed up is that, oh my God, I'm not going to touch that. And it's like, well, wait a minute. What if there's something good there?
Right.
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 And so, with that being said, what was that gold that you were able to extract from Dianetics?
Yeah, so that come from that is where I get my idea of I don't care about the symptoms, I care about the treatment, right? So they
Mm.
say that there's only one way to treat everything, which is their auditing, right?
Hmm.
Like their kind of mind process that they do. So that was very foundational for me that to realize like, well, if it's all based on one cause, then I don't care how that cause manifests. I just have to fix the cause, right? So like that was like very foundational in that line of thinking and understanding. Now, as far as actual um like differences, so like what they say is kind of like they call them, instead of like limiting beliefs or traumas, they call them engrams, right?
Mm.
And so their theory is that you keep going back in time and back in time and back in time, and eventually I think it's like at the moment of conception or something, you have like this basic um um engram, right? So this is all like in Dianetics. This isn't like their high end stuff that they sue over, but it's like
Yeah.
it's just very commonly available. And so their theory is that if you heal that, everything heals above it, right? And so I have something similar but different. So I know if I can find the root cause and I can resolve that, everything above that resolves. But my difference is that you can get traumatized later in life, right? Like it's not just that one thing. It's like, okay, if you go to war, you've been traumatized, right? If you had a car accident, you've probably been traumatized. You have limiting beliefs that develop later in life, even as an adult, right? And so by healing the past, it doesn't retroactively heal the future. And so that's why I'm so keen on like I have to find every single root cause of every one of your problems. And I don't care whether it started as a child, I don't care whether it started yesterday. If I can kill that root, then everything based on that one root resolves. So like I said, like what they taught was like very eye-opening for me. But there's a lot of things that like I don't think actually stand up to, you know, the test of practice, right? So
Hmm.
it's like their auditing can take years and I can fix someone in 5 minutes, then clearly we're doing something different.
100%. And I think that's also a big difference with like traditional, psychiatric or psychological therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where and I've been through my share of fucking therapy for years. Keyword years,
Yeah.
right? Where it's just like, okay, let's revisit that trauma and open that fucking wound. And how bad did you? And it's like, Jesus Christ, dude, is this really gonna fucking help me? Come on.
Right. That's what I was talking about with the thorn, right? You're sitting there with this giant thorn in your head, and you're like, Tell me
So
about the
that was a
thorn and
thorn.
how it hurts. And you're like, it's a freaking thorn, man.
Yeah.
Pull it out.
Yeah,
They're
dude.
like, no, no, let me see you next week and we'll continue talking about this thorn. You're like,
Oh,
ah.
yeah. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. That's ever so that's the one thing I appreciate about taking it back to the beginning about sales is that it's a lot of personal development. And that's where I got introduced to fucking mindset theory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I really appreciate is that whole idea of like, just being aware of your limiting beliefs. Let's change in narratives. Let's do something about it, as opposed to what therapy does, where it's just like, cool, I'll, like you just said, I'll see you in a week. And how did that make you feel? And and in some cases, it's just like, I'm trying to fucking heal this wound, but here's this dude going, oh, let's open it up again.
Right,
It's
right,
like,
right.
geez, thanks, bro. And so, by the way, that was already 35 minutes. I think where are we going into like the 40? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we're
It's been, yeah, I know,
this will
right?
be the start of your hour and a half long
No
podcast.
kidding, dude. No kidding, dude. Hey, so real quick before we end it, I want to dip into the computer science thing,
Yeah.
right? And because here's the thing, I mean, is that because a lot of computer science, I mean, it's based off the rules of logic and the rules of logic and the rules of thinking, right? And so is that kind of like a basis in how the mind works? And so they were like, hey, let's.
Yeah, so a computer is a very much representation of the interplay between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Like we are like goes back to the Android thing. We are biological computers, right? And computers operate off of logic gates, right? And so when you have a limiting belief, it says this and this and this is true, therefore this is true, right? And so my goal is to go in there and change those logic gates, and therefore the outcome changes, right? So I'm literally rewriting your programming. It's not hypnosis. So like the difference between hypnosis and what I do is hypnosis doesn't remove the stuff that's already there, right? It does go down to your subconscious, but it just like, let's say you have a limiting belief or trauma, and hypnosis just starts piling on top of that, right? The
Mm,
trauma and limiting belief is still there. So you're creating conflicting programs, right? Whereas I go in there and I change that original program, everything resolves off of that, and I'm rewriting your code, and therefore the output on the screen changes, right? The conscious mind changes as a result of like me working on the hard drive and whatever other parts of computer there are.
gotcha. Very cool. You gonna write a book one of these days about all this? What's up?
I might.
I'm digging your content around it, man. It's really cool. I just, seeing that shift from when we first, got to know each other, and I'm just like, just really digging it and super. I just want to be supportive of it. So,
Yeah,
big reason,
yeah,
having you here on the show for sure, and also haven't talked to you in a while. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Where can people find you?
So I'm really only on Facebook. Like, um, if you see me on this podcast, you know what I look like. Otherwise, there's probably very few people in the world named Jedediah Thomas. So you could probably search for me. I'm, the the weird looking white guy that right now I have a beach background on my profile, but um if there's a lot of stuff about mindset and a lot of puns and humor, it's probably me.
It definitely is. Right on, buddy. Well, thank you so much, man. We're going to wrap it up here. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another great episode of The Way of El Marco. This has been episode number 12. Make sure to check out Jedediah on Facebook. I think at some point he'll probably get a website going or something, or maybe even some content on YouTube. I don't know. Maybe might be
Maybe
a good thing. He might even start a podcast. Who knows?
we shall see.
We shall see. All right, folks, hit the subscribe button where it's at. Tell your friends, share it with your mom and your grandma because they love this stuff. Until next time, my friends.